David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. Chapter 48, Domestic. I labored hard at my book without allowing it to interfere with the punctual discharge of my newspaper duties, and it came out and was very successful. I was not stunned by the praise which sounded in my ears, notwithstanding that I was keenly alive to it and thought better of my own performance. I have little doubt than anybody else did. I had been writing in the newspaper and elsewhere so prosperously that one joyful night I noted down the music of the parliamentary bagpipes for the last time. I had been married, I suppose, about a year and a half. After several varieties of experiment, we had given up the housekeeping as a bad job. The house kept itself, and we kept a page. The unlucky page, engaged in an evil hour at £6.10 per annum, was a source of continual trouble to me. He stole Dora's watch, which, like everything else belonging to us, had no particular place of its own. The day after that, on which I was obliged to appear against him, he made certain revelations touching a hamper in the cellar, which we believed to be full of wine, but which had nothing in it except bottles and corks. We supposed he had now eased his mind and told the worst he knew of the cook. But a day or two afterward, his conscience sustained a new twinge, and he disclosed how she had a little girl who, early every morning, took away our bread, and also how he himself had been suborned to maintain the milkman in coals. In 2 or 3 days more, I was informed by the authorities of his having led to the discovery of sirloins of beef among the kitchen stuff and sheets in the rag bag. A little while afterward, he broke out in an entirely new direction and confessed to a knowledge of burglarious intentions as to our premises on the part of the potboy, who was immediately taken up. I got to be so ashamed of being such a victim that I would have given him any money to hold his tongue, or would have offered a round bribe for his being permitted to run away. All this led me into some serious reflections, and presented our mistakes in a new aspect, as I could not help communicating to Dora one evening in spite of my tenderness for her. "My love," said I, "it is very painful to me to think that our want of system and management involves not only ourselves, which we have got used to, but other people. We have been silent for a long time now. You are going to be cross," said Dora. "Or you have been silent for a long time now. For a long time, and now you are going to be cross," said Dora. "No, my dear, indeed. Let me explain to you what I mean." "I think I don't want to know," said Dora. "But I want you to know, my love. Put Jip down." Dora put his nose to mine and said, "Boo!" to drive my seriousness away, but, succeeding, ordered him into his pagoda and sat looking at me with her hands folded in a most resigned little expression of countenance. "The fact is, my dear," I began, "there is a contagion in us. I begin to be afraid that it is the fault of that the fault is not entirely on one side, but that these people all turn out ill because we don't turn out very well ourselves." "Oh, what an accusation!" exclaimed Dora, opening her eyes wide. "To say that you ever saw me take gold watches! Oh!" "My dearest," I remonstrated, "don't talk preposterous nonsense. Who has made the least allusion to gold watches?" "You did," returned Dora. "You know you did. You said I hadn't turned out well, and compared me to him." "To whom?" I asked. "To the page," sobbed Dora. "Oh, you cruel fellow! Why didn't you tell me your opinion of me before we were married? Oh, what a dreadful opinion to have of me! Oh, my goodness!" "My darling girl," I retorted, "I really must entreat you to be reasonable and listen to what I did say and do say. My dear Dora, unless we learn to do our duty to those with whom we employ, they will never learn to do their duty to us. I am afraid we present opportunities to people to do wrong that never ought to be presented. We are positively corrupting people. We are bound to think of that. I can't help thinking of it, Dora. It is a reflection I am unable to dismiss, and it sometimes makes me very uneasy. There, dear, that's all. Come now, don't be foolish." Dora would not allow me for a time to remove the handkerchief. She sat sobbing and murmuring behind it that if I was uneasy, why had I ever been married? Why hadn't I said, even the day before we went to church, that I knew I should be uneasy, and I would rather not? If I couldn't bear her, why didn't I send her away to her aunts at Putney, or to Julia Mills in India? Dora was so afflicted and so afflicted me by being in that condition that I felt it was of no use repeating this kind of effort, though never so mildly, and I must take some other course. What other course was left to take to form her mind? This was a common phrase of words, which had a fair and promising sound, and I resolved to form Dora's mind. I began immediately. When Dora was very childish, and I would have infinitely preferred to humor her, I tried to be grave, and disconcerted her, and myself too. I talked to her on the subjects which occupied my thoughts, and I read Shakespeare to her, and fatigued her to the last degree. I accustomed myself to giving her, as it were quite casually, little scraps of useful information or sound opinion, and she started from them. When I let them off, as if they had been crackers, no matter how incidentally or naturally I endeavored to form my little wife's mind, I could not help seeing that she always had an instinctive perception of what I was about, and became a prey to the keenest apprehensions. In particular, it was clear to me that she thought Shakespeare a terrible fellow. The formation went on very slowly. I persevered, even for months, finding at last, however, that, although I had been all this time a very porcupine or hedgehog, bristling all over with determination, I had effected nothing. It began to occur to me that perhaps Dora's mind was already formed. On further consideration, this appeared so likely that I abandoned my scheme, resolving henceforth to be satisfied with my child wife, and to try to change her into nothing else by any process. I was heartily tired of being sagacious and prudent by myself, and of seeing my darling under restraint. So I bought a pretty pair of earrings for her and a collar for Jip, and went home one day to make myself agreeable. I sat down by my wife on the sofa and put the earrings in her ears, and then I told her that I feared we had not been quite as good company lately as we used to be, and that the fault was mine, which I sincerely felt, and which indeed it was. "The truth, Dora, my life," I said, "I have been trying to be wise." "And to make me wise too," said Dora timidly. "Haven't you, Dodie?" I nodded assent to the pretty inquiry of the raised eyebrows and kissed the parted lips. "It's not a bit of use," said Dora, shaking her head until the earrings rang. "You know what a little thing I am, and what I wanted you to call me from the first. If you can't do it, I'm afraid you'll never like me. Are you sure you don't think sometimes it would have been better to have—" "Done what, my dear?" For she made no effort to proceed. "Nothing," said Dora. "Nothing?" I repeated. She put her arms round my neck and laughed, and called herself by her favorite name of Goose, and hid her face on my shoulder in such a profusion of curls that it was quite a task to clear them away and see it. Don't I think it would have been better to have done nothing than to have tried to form my little wife's mind?" said I, laughing at myself. "Is that the question? Yes, indeed I do." "Is that what you have been trying?" cried Dora. "Oh, what a shocking boy!" "But I shall never try any more," said I, "for I love her dearly as she is." "Without a story? Really?" inquired Dora, creeping closer to me. "Why should I seek to change?" said I. "What has been so precious for me for so long? You never can show better than as your own natural self, my sweet Dora, and we'll try no conceited experiments, but go back to our old way and be happy." "And be happy," returned Dora. "Yes, all day. And you won't mind things going a tiny morsel wrong sometimes?" "No, no," said I. "We must do the best we can." "It's better for me to be stupid than uncomfortable, isn't it?" said Dora. "Better to be naturally Dora than anything else in the world." "In the world? Oh, Dodie, it's a large place." She shook her head, turned her delighted bright eyes up to mine, kissed me, broke into a merry laugh, and sprang away to put on Jip's new collar. So ended my last attempt to make any change in Dora. I had been unhappy in trying it. I could not endure my own solitary wisdom. I could not reconcile it with her former appeal to me as my child wife. I resolved to do what I could in a quiet way to improve our proceedings myself, but I foresaw that my utmost would be very little. I always loved her. I bore the weight of all our little cares and all my projects. Dora held the pens, and we both felt that our shares were adjusted as the case required. It made my second year much happier than my first, and what was better still, made Dora's life all sunshine. But as that year wore on, Dora was not strong. I had hoped that lighter hands than mine would help to mold her character, and that a baby smile upon her breast might change my child wife to a woman. It was not to be. The spirit fluttered for a moment on the threshold of his little prison, and, unconscious of my captivity, took wing. "When I can run about again as I used to do, Aunt," said Dora, "I shall make Jip race. He is getting quite slow and lazy." "I suspect, my dear," said my aunt, quietly working by her side, "he has a worse disorder than that. Age, Dora." "Do you think he is old?" said Dora, astonished. "Oh, how strange it seems that Jip should be old." "It is a complaint we are all liable to, little one, as we get on in life," said my aunt cheerfully. "I don't feel more free from it than I used to be, I assure you." "But Jip," said Dora, looking at him with compassion. "Even little Jip, oh, poor fellow." Jip nestled closer to his mistress and lazily licked her hand. "You are not so old, Jip, are you, that you'll leave your mistress yet?" said Dora. "We may keep one another company a little longer." My pretty Dora, when she came down to dinner on the evening Sunday, and was so glad to see old Traddles, who always dined with us on Sunday, we thought she would be running about as she used to do in a few days. But they said, wait a few days more, and then wait a few days more, and still she neither ran nor walked. She looked very pretty and was very merry, but the little feet that used to be so nimble when they danced round Jip were dull and motionless. I began to carry her downstairs every morning and upstairs every night. She would clasp me round the neck and laugh, and while, as I did it for a wager, Jip would bark and caper round us and go on as before, and look back on the landing, breathing short to see if we were coming. My aunt, the best and most cheerful of nurses, would trudge after us, a moving mass of shawls and pillows. Mr. Dick would not have been relinquished his post of candle-bearer to anyone alive. Traddles would be often at the bottom of the staircase looking on, taking charge of sportive messages from Dora to the dearest girl in the world. We made quite a gay procession of it. My child wife was the gayest there. But sometimes, when I took her up and felt that she was lighter in my arms, a dead black feeling came upon me, as if I were approaching to some frozen region, yet unseen, that numbed my life. I avoided the recognition of this feeling by any name, or by any commuting with myself, until one night, when it was very strong upon me, and my aunt had left her with a parting of "Good night, little Blossom," I sat down on my desk alone and cried to think, oh, what a fatal name it was, and how the blossom withered in its bloom upon the tree. And that is the end of chapter 48.